So as Jake Tapper did his book tour yesterday, he had to sit down with Katie Couric, who knew she was still doing stuff, along with his co-author Alex Thompson. And a stunning revelation came out during this interview. It's in the book, and it has to do with one of the questions we've been asking for quite some time. Clearly, Joe Biden has mashed potato for brains. Clearly, we've all seen that Joe Biden couldn't possibly run for re-election. That's why he pulled himself out. So the question is, if he's incapable of making it through a speech or a television interview, if he's incapable of running for office, then clearly he's incapable of being president of the United States. So who's really running things in the White House? We've got a few answers to that question, and they're going to piss you off. Here's the first one.
How big a factor was the Hunter stuff?
I think it was considerable. I think Hunter was driving the decision making for the family in a way that he was almost like a chief of staff of the family.
Does that strike you as pretty bizarre?
It's bizarre because I think he is provably, demonstrably unethical, sleazy, and prone to horrible decisions. I mean,
tell me how you really feel.
Well, I mean, I'm just look at the record. I mean, after his brother died, he cheated on his wife with his brother's widow, and then got her addicted to crack. That's just one thing I could say. I mean, I don't have a lot of personal regard for him, and just based on having nothing to do with, I barely have ever met him. I've met him like once or twice, but I knew Bo. Bo was a great, upstanding guy.
I knew him too. Really,
a real loss for the country too, not just for his family, for the country. But Hunter is not that, and the idea of letting him drive the family car, as it were, is just really, really questionable.
So Hunter Biden was the de facto chief of staff, driving many of the decisions in the Biden White House. Chief of staff, Hunter Biden. By the way, hearing Jake Tapper come out against Hunter Biden raises a couple of issues. The first is that now we know that Hunter Biden and Jake Tapper have actually met quite a few times, including that time at the Super Bowl, Jake, when Hunter threatened to knock you out because you had called him as he was sitting by his brother Bo's bedside as he was about to die because you wanted an exclusive with him and the Biden family. They were kind of pissed off about that, weren't they? Why didn't you reveal that part of the story to Katie Couric just now? Oh, it's okay. We love you. You're pristine. You can do no wrong. You're Jake Tapper. Also, everything that he just said about Hunter Biden, completely fact-based, about dating his brother's widow and getting her addicted to crack and all of the drug use and all of the illegal stuff that he did. That's all true. Have you ever heard Jake Tapper saying that stuff on his show on CNN? We've talked about it, but we're vilified when we do that. How dare you? This is a troubled young man. And Joe Biden's protection of him is just because it's the regular love that a father would show his son. Talking like Hunter's, 7 years old when he's in his 50s. But boy, the standards change here when Jake Tapper needs to sell a book, don't they? So there's one idea. Who's running the White House? Chief of Staff Hunter crackhead felon Biden is running the White House. But then there's this. Journalist Mark Halperin on the Two-Way platform, Two-Way Tonight, last night. He had Ed Martin. Ed Martin had been the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia until squirrely nuts Tom Tillis decided to pull his support for him. But that's okay, because as you know, Donald Trump has now appointed him in a couple of key positions, including the weaponization of the Justice Department division at the DOJ. And he's also looking into pardons. He's the pardon attorney now in the Justice Department, which means he can scrutinize past pardons, Joe Biden's pardons, and also other activities that happened during the Biden White House, including the use of the autopen. So, Ed Martin, what have you learned about what happened on Joe's bad days at the White House?
You were with us on the morning meeting. You talked at length at 2 stops before he went into the meeting with the House conference, talked to the media, and he talked a lot about this issue of the autopen. All presidents use autopen, but there seems to be a sense in the Trump administration that Joe Biden, and this is something Ed I think is working on, that Joe Biden used the or people used the autopen to sign things on Joe Biden's behalf, including pardons that may be not legally, constitutionally permissible if it wasn't actually the president and it was some robot or whatever you call the autopen. So here's number 3. This is a Truth Social post from the president about this topic. And again, he talked about it at length this morning. Joe Biden was not for open borders. He never talked about open borders. We're criminals of all kinds. All right, blah, 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 go through the process. It was the people that knew he was cognitively impaired and took that, and that took over the autopen. They stole the presidency of the United States and put us in great danger. This is treason at the highest level. So Ed, where did this start, this notion that the autopen was improperly used, and what evidence have you seen for the president's accusation?
Well, I'll make a little news for you, Mark, here. I was in the office as U.S. attorney for about 5 days when I wrote to a number of senior Biden officials in the White House saying, what did you know about Joe Biden's competence and the pardons? And I got some responses. And so I've been looking at this for a while. Again, I think that the question is more about competence. If you have someone who's not competent, they can't enter into a contract, right? And if you do enter into a contract, you've committed fraud. The question is whether you use a tool to trick people into entering into a fraud. So the Biden pardons are unprecedented. The ones right before Christmas that he did, people forget this. I think it's a couple thousand pardons that were done. Did he know about that? Did he really understand? Look, the pardon power is plenary, but the guy has to be competent to do it. Now you come forward to this question broadly of the autopen. Autopen's completely obviously legal if you're competent, and there must be a trail that shows who was in charge of the autopen. I know this exists. Like, I worked for a governor. We had a system for an autopen to be able to use it. And so right now we have unprecedented conduct, the pardons, unprecedented admissions, the books, as well as the staffers. I had a whistleblower in my office 10 days ago, senior Democrat, saying, look, it was these 3 people that controlled access and they were making money off of it. I don't know if I believe it yet, but the point is, I think we have to get to the bottom of it for the American people and to protect the process. And that's what we're doing. And by the way, make it all the way to the bottom. It may not be criminal, but it certainly should be a scandal of the first order, maybe in human history, or maybe American history. I sound like the president there, but in American history, to have this kind of conduct.
And I'm from Maryland, not North Carolina, so I'm not that bright. Did I miss what the news was? You said you'd make news. What was the news you made?
The news was that nobody knows until that I was writing to these folks at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and including the Biden family. I don't think anybody has seen that. So my point is, I'm bragging about being there early. Everybody got to this 120 days later.
Did they reply, or you just sent them letters?
No, they didn't.
What'd they say?
Well, a couple of them lawyered up, and one of them wrote directly. I won't talk about what they said.
And can you and you probably won't tell us, but can you characterize who the whistleblower was? It someone who worked in the Biden White House?
Biden campaign, 2020 campaign at the highest levels.
2020, and who are the 3 people they said were doing it for money?
This is the one who's let me say it carefully. Yeah. The gatekeepers. Different characterization of who was using the access, but the gatekeepers were Klain and Anita Dunn and Bob Bauer, and those 3 were really dominant characters in the White House. Ricchetti a little bit, and obviously Jill, but I think that was the 3. I was with this person, and I said, "What about Susan Rice? What about some of these others?" And they said, "No, these were the ones."
Okay, all right. Now that is huge news. So there were 3 gatekeepers who controlled the use of the autopen. Ron Klain, who was the chief of staff. Did you vote for Ron Klain? Did you elect Ron Klain to anything? No, but at least Ron Klain was a public figure that became a federal government employee, had to divest himself from any ownership of companies or investments or any other jobs. He was a public servant working as a chief of staff, right? What was that second name? Anita Dunn. Now, did you hear Mr. Martin there say that there was another whistleblower who said that there were people in the White House who were using the autopen for pardons and other things, and they were making money off of it? Now, how is that possible? How do you make money off of it? Well, I'm going to speculate here, and it's just speculation, but that's my job as an analyst and as somebody who provides context and perspective on the news. You hear things like this and you start putting 2 and 2 together and you start to speculate on what could have happened. And because of the lack of transparency or anybody giving an honest answer to a question out of this Biden White House, All we're left is to speculate. So we know that Joe Biden had bad days and he couldn't make decisions. We know that the autopen was used in an unprecedented way for pardons and other executive orders and legislation. And we know now from the former U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia that a whistleblower has told him that Ron Klain and Anita Dunn were two of the people who controlled that autopen. And what else do we know about Anita Dunn? Well, unlike Ron Klain, Anita Dunn was never actually a permanent employee of the U.S. government. Anita Dunn, who worked in the in the Obama administration, she was the one who had to leave under a cloud of shame and scandal because she gave a speech saying that one of her heroes was Mao Zedong, you know, the communist Marxist mass murderer. She's a radical leftist. Anita Dunn was brought into the Biden White House, but she was never given a permanent job. She was always employed under what's called a special government employee, like Elon Musk. Remember, Elon Musk was only able to keep his job for 120 days, and then he had to leave. Otherwise, if he stayed longer, he would have had to divest himself from all ownership of any company, from any job, from any salary, from any payroll, from any other investments even. That's what happens when you become a government employee. That's why the sacrifice is so great, when people give up everything they've got. Anita Dunn was a special government employee like that. That meant she could work in the White House, have access to the President of the United States and the machinations of the U.S. government at the executive branch at the highest possible level, and still keep her job on K Street, advising lawyers and lobbyists in Washington, D.C. She could still keep all of her investments, all her ownership, everything that she did to make money. Anita Dunn, we are told now, based on this report, also had access to the autopen. I think that deserves some further scrutiny, doesn't it? All right, so who was running the White House? We've got Anita Dunn, we've got Ron Klain, we've got Hunter Biden, and then there's this, quickly, from the book itself. From Tapper's book. Many of Biden's own aides were also kept at arm's length from the president. Alumni of the Obama administration noticed the difference. Obama would hash it out with deputies and mid-level aides. Biden, by contrast, mostly met with the Politburo. The Politburo is this group, which is kind of funny that he uses Politburo since that's from the Soviet Union communist days. But it's basically a circle of 5 or more closest advisors who would make decisions as a committee in the Politburo. You'd always have a general secretary, of course. A meeting could easily be derailed and the aides would have to reconvene without the person who had triggered the president. They noted that they sometimes spent more time on strategizing how to present the decision to Biden than on the substance of the decision itself. In practice, Bruce Reed was the real domestic policy advisor. Mike Donnellan was the actual political director. Steve Ricchetti controlled legislative affairs. Ron Klain controlled a bit of everything. Did you hear any of these? These are all names that were kept under the shadows, under cover. These were not secretaries. These were not cabinet members. These were not big, high-profile people, but they, according to this book, made big decisions. And then here's a quote. Some felt that the insularity was the Politburo's way of protecting its influence. Quote, 5 people were running the country, and Joe Biden was at best a senior member of the board. They would make huge economic decisions without calling Treasury Secretary Yellen. 5 people were running the country. Joe Biden was at best a senior member of the board. And who those 5 people were still seems to be a little bit up in the air, but it appears to be Ron Klain, Anita Dunn, maybe Hunter sometimes, maybe Jill sometimes. And Joe Biden being a senior member of the board doesn't mean he's the head of the board. It doesn't mean he's the chairman of the board. It doesn't mean he has veto power. He's just, somebody as part of the group that runs the country that has a little more seniority, perhaps. This is the greatest political scandal in American history. And the scrutiny has just begun on this. and we will continue to follow it as well. But rest assured that for 4 years, while our men and women were in harm's way, while military catastrophes happened in Afghanistan and in the Middle East, as our economy was tanking and inflation was sky high, and as our borders were open and criminals and illegal immigrants were flooding our country to the tune of tens of millions, Hunter Biden was acting as a de facto chief of staff much of the time. So it all kind of makes sense, doesn't it?